Hey, what is this supposed to be? You print this off the internet?
Lying still. I'm lying still.
I'm Senior Chief Malik Rowan in Naval Special Warfare. Why am I being stopped?
Hey, Travis, step back here behind him. Get down.
I'm not resisting.
Get down on the ground now.
I am an officer. Let go of me.
Stop resisting.
I'm lying still. You're on my shoulder.
At 6:58 a.m., the Savannah airport didn't just go quiet, it stopped breathing. The sound was unmistakable, the wet, heavy thud of a human skull bouncing off polished granite. Two white officers were on top of a black man, their knees driving into his spine, pinning him with the kind of frantic violence usually reserved for active shooters. But the man underneath them wasn't holding a weapon. He was wearing United States Navy dress blues. His name was Senior Chief Malik Rowan. He was an active-duty SEAL with 15 years of classified operations under his belt, a man trained to dismantle insurgents in the dark. But right now, to Officers Travis Hensley and Cole Maddox, he was just a suspect who didn't look right. One of the bodycams would later catch the audio that ended careers. Guys like him fake this stuff all the time. They didn't know it yet, but they hadn't just tackled a tourist. They had assaulted a Tier 1 asset of the U.S. military. 12 minutes from now, phones in the Pentagon would scream. Admirals would be waking up federal agents. The chain of command was about to detonate. But to understand how a quiet Tuesday morning turned into a national catastrophe, you have to watch the fuse get lit. Travis Hensley didn't police the terminal, he hunted it. He stood by the security checkpoint, nursing a lukewarm coffee, watching the crowd with the bored arrogance of a man who knows he is the law. He had a reputation in the department. Old school, they called it. It was code for lawsuit waiting to happen. Short fuse, heavy hands, the kind of cop who saw citizens as targets. Beside him stood Cole Maddox, 5 years on the force and still spineless. Maddox was a mimic, laughing at Hensley's jokes and backing his plays, too terrified to ever be the one to say stop. Then the crowd parted, and Malik Rowan walked in. He moved with a rhythm that civilians don't have, efficient, fluid. His dress blues were pressed razor-sharp, a garment bag slung over one shoulder. He was heading to a classified briefing in Norfolk, still carrying the heavy silence of a teammate's funeral he'd attended yesterday. He passed the coffee kiosk. Hensley's eyes snagged on the gold chevrons, the warfare insignia, the confidence. Hensley stepped out. He didn't ask for attention. He took it. "Hey, you, in the costume." Rowan didn't startle. He didn't flinch. He simply ceased movement, a machine powering down. He pivoted slowly, his face a mask of absolute discipline. "Excuse me?" Rowan's voice was low, controlled. Hensley took a slow, slurping sip of his coffee, eyes scanning the medals on Rowan's chest like he was inspecting a fake Rolex. "I said stop. That your bag?" "It is. Drop it." Rowan paused, a microsecond of calculation. He was lethal in 3 different martial arts, but he knew the battlefield he was standing on now was different. Here, he was the prey. He set the bag down. "Is there a problem, officer?"
Hensley stepped in close. Too close. He smelled like stale caffeine and aggression. "We'll decide if there's a problem. Where are you coming from?" "Charleston. I have a connecting flight." "Orders?" Rowan moved his hand toward his jacket, slow, deliberate, telegraphing safety. "I have my military ID and travel orders in my breast pocket." "Don't get cute," Hensley barked, hand hovering near his belt. "Keep your hands visible." Maddox flanked to the left, cutting off the escape route. "Just do what he says, pal," he mumbled, his voice shaky but obedient. Rowan held his hands out, palms open. "I am complying." Hensley leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper meant only for them. "See, here's the thing. A lot of people wear uniforms they didn't earn. You fit a description." Rowan's jaw tightened, the muscle feathered beneath the skin. "What description is that?" "The kind that thinks a fancy suit gets him a free pass," Hensley smirked. It was an ugly, provocative thing. "Turn around." "I am a senior chief in the United States Navy."
Rowan said, the steel finally leaking into his tone. Check the ID, verify the rank. I don't verify squat until you turn around. For what cause? Because I said so. Maddox grabbed Rowan's bicep. Sir, turn around. Rowan exhaled, a long, steady breath. He turned, clasping his hands behind his back. I am not resisting, he announced, loud enough for the iPhone cameras that were starting to rise from the crowd like periscopes. Hensley grabbed Rowan's wrist and cranked it high, a joint lock designed to force a flinch. Stop tensing up. I'm standing still. I said stop resisting, Hensley shouted, playing to the back of the room now. He leaned into Maddox, his voice trembling with anticipation. Watch him. These guys always snap. Rowan's heart rate didn't spike. It dropped. The combat focus washed over him. He realized with terrifying clarity that compliance was no longer an option. Hensley didn't want an ID. He wanted a reason. That is not accurate, Rowan said. Hensley's face went crimson. The trap was set. He stepped back, unclipping his radio, his other hand drifting to his baton. You don't get to decide that, boy. Rowan looked at the reflection in the glass kiosk. He saw the officer's hand tightening on the weapon. He saw the shift in weight, and he knew, a split second before it happened, that the talking was over. Hensley lunged. The collision wasn't a scuffle. It was an execution of gravity. You don't look like a senior chief, Hensley hissed, his voice dripping with disdain. You don't look like you belong in that uniform. Rowan turned his head, his eyes locking onto Hensley's with a cold, terrifying calm. You don't get to decide that. That was the trigger. Hensley's hand drove into the center of Rowan's back, a cheap shot designed to unbalance him. Get down, Hensley screamed, playing to the cameras he pretended to ignore. I am not resisting, Rowan said, his voice steady, even as his center of gravity shifted. But facts didn't matter. Hensley shoved harder, throwing his weight forward, while Officer Maddox hooked Rowan's left leg. The momentum carried all three men forward in a tangled, violent heap. Rowan's knees hit the commercial tile first, then his shoulder. Then, with a sickening crack that echoed off the high ceilings of the concourse, his face met the floor. The terminal gasped, a collective intake of breath from 50 travelers watching a man in American military dress blues get planted face first into the dirt. Stop moving, Hensley yelled, planting his knee squarely between Rowan's shoulder blades, driving the air from his lungs. I am not moving, Rowan ground out through clenched teeth, his cheek pressed against the cold, polished stone. You are injuring a federal agent. Shut up. Hensley grabbed Rowan's wrists, forcing them together with unnecessary torque. The handcuffs ratcheted shut, click, 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 tight enough to bite into the skin. You should have thought about that before you got mouthy. Maddox scrambled up, breathless, looking around at the gathering crowd. The circle was tightening. Clear out, folks, keep walking. A man in a faded Vietnam veteran ball cap stepped forward, pointing a trembling finger. That is a Navy uniform, son. You don't need to be doing all that. Hensley shot him a look that could peel paint. Sir, back the hell up. Mind your business. Rowan lay perfectly still. His training had taken over. In the chaos of combat, panic is death. He regulated his breathing, feeling the heavy knee in his back, acutely aware of the red light blinking on Hensley's chest. Record everything. Stand him up, Maddox muttered, his nerve failing him. Hensley hauled Rowan to his feet by the chain of the handcuffs, wrenching his shoulders back. You're being detained for disorderly conduct and failure to comply. I complied with every command, Rowan replied, his voice low and dangerous. We'll sort that out downtown. You're coming with us. They began to march him toward the side corridor, a prisoner of war in his own country. But they didn't make it 5 steps. What the hell is going on here? Sergeant Renee Carver stepped into their path. She was an airport veteran, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, drawn by the commotion. She looked at the scene, 2 sweaty officers and a calm, cuffed man with a chest full of ribbons. Hensley answered first, fast and defensive. Possible impersonation, Sarge. Subject got aggressive. We had to neutralize. Rowan met Carver's eyes. He didn't plead, he reported. "Sergeant, I am an active-duty Navy SEAL. I have my common access card and travel orders in my breast pocket. I did not resist. I was assaulted." Carver looked from the cuffs to the impeccable dress blues, then to Hensley's white-knuckled grip on the prisoner. The math wasn't adding up. "Let me see his identification," Carver ordered. Hensley hesitated. It was a pause that lasted half a second, but it screamed volumes. He knew he was wrong. And in that silence, with iPhones raised like a firing squad, the power dynamic in the terminal began to shift. "Travis," Carver warned, "ID now." Hensley finally released his grip, reaching into Rowan's jacket with jerky, angry movements. He pulled out the military ID and the folded travel documents. His jaw was working, grinding side to side. He hated being checked. Carver took the ID. She looked at the photo. She looked at the man in cuffs. Rowan Malik, rank Senior Chief Petty Officer. She unfolded the orders. Norfolk, Naval Special Warfare Command, official travel. She looked up, her face pale. "Senior Chief, you're active duty?" "Yes, ma'am." Carver turned slowly to Hensley. "Why is he in cuffs?" "He was being evasive," Hensley lied, desperate to control the narrative. "Wouldn't answer questions, gave us attitude." "I answered every question," Rowan interjected, his voice cutting through the noise. "I asked why I was being stopped. That's when he put hands on me." "He didn't do anything," the man in the veteran cap shouted from the crowd. "We all saw it." "Sir, step back," Hensley barked. "Enough." Carver raised a hand, silencing him. "Travis, take your knee off his back. He's already cuffed." "We still need to verify this," Hensley argued, his voice rising in pitch. "Anyone can print fake orders on a laser jet." Rowan looked straight at Hensley. "You ran my ID through your system the moment you took it. You know it's real." Maddox looked at his boots. We were just following procedure, Sarge." Carver looked at the red light on Hensley's chest. "Procedure doesn't involve slamming a compliant service member face first on the floor of a public terminal. Uncuff him." Hensley froze. To uncuff him was to admit defeat. "He matched a profile, Sarge. We had to be sure." "What profile?" Carver asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Hensley opened his mouth, but Rowan answered for him. "We get alerts about stolen uniforms," Hensley stammered. Rowan leaned in, his voice dropping to a register that carried more weight than a scream. "You didn't stop any of the 3 white officers in uniform who walked past this checkpoint 5 minutes before me." The air in the terminal vanished. The accusation hung there, undeniable and suffocating. Carver closed the folder. "Uncuff him, now." "Maybe we should take him to the office first," Maddox whispered, trying to salvage the disaster. "Run it again?" "No," said Carver. "You've got his ID, his orders, and half of Savannah watching this on Facebook Live. Take the damn cuffs off." Hensley unlocked the wrists, his movements rough and petulant. Rowan flexed his hands, red welts rising where the metal had bitten into his skin. "Senior Chief, are you injured?" Carver asked, stepping between her officers and the SEAL. "I'm fine, but I want this documented." "He's fine," Hensley muttered, turning away. "He's just making a scene for the cameras." Rowan stepped forward. "You made the scene, Officer Hensley, when you decided I didn't belong in my own skin." Carver saw the crowd pressing in. She saw the veteran in the cap talking to a young woman who was typing furiously on her phone. She knew what was happening. This wasn't just a bad arrest. It was a viral bomb, and the fuse was already burning. "Sir," Carver said, lowering her voice, "I'm sorry for what happened. We're going to review the footage and file a report." Rowan looked at the phones pointed at him. He looked at Hensley, who was still glaring, unrepentant. "With respect, Sergeant," Rowan brushed the dust from his ribbons, "this isn't a report issue. That was a federal civil rights violation." Carver swallowed hard. She wanted to de-escalate, but she was too late. Behind the crowd, near the gate, the man in the baseball cap hit upload. He didn't know it, but he had just declared war on the Savannah Police Department, and the first casualty was about to be the truth. But inside the terminal, the flames were already rising. Sergeant Renee Carver looked at the scuffed knees of Malik Rowan's dress blues, then at the smoldering defiance in Officer Hensley's eyes. She knew exactly what time it was. It was time to call the boss. "I'm notifying Chief Fenner," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Hensley's head snapped toward her like a whip. "For what? We handled it. Situation is secure." "No, Travis," Carver said, stepping away from him to key her mic. "You didn't handle it. You detonated it." She pressed the button on her shoulder radio. "Chief Fenner, this is Carver in Concourse B. We have a use of force incident involving an active-duty Navy senior chief in dress uniform. I need you on scene, now." There was a pause. Static hissed in the earpiece. Then the chief's voice cut through, tight and clipped. "Repeat that. Active-duty SEAL?" "Affirmative. Body cams rolling. Crowd witnesses hostile. I'm on my way." Hensley exhaled sharply through his nose, a sound of pure irritation. He shifted his weight, adjusting his belt. "This is getting blown way out of proportion. He resisted, we detained. End of story." Rowan, rubbing his bruised wrist, spoke without looking up. "It's being taken seriously. That's the difference." Officer Maddox leaned in toward his partner, his earlier bravado evaporating. "Travis, maybe we should have just checked the ID and let him walk. He was just asking questions." Hensley shot him a look that could cut glass. He was getting smart. You don't let them run the stop. Before Hensley could dig his grave any deeper, Chief Douglas Fenner rounded the corner. Fenner was a man in his 50s who wore authority like a second skin. He didn't run, he strode. He took in the scene in a single sweep. The circle of civilians holding phones like weapons, the scuffed floor, the two sweating officers, and the black man in a pristine uniform that was now covered in airport dust. "Status," Fenner demanded. Carver stepped forward. "Sir, Officers Hensley and Maddox detained Senior Chief Rowan. Force was used, subject claims compliance. His ID and orders are valid." Fenner looked at Rowan. "Senior Chief, is that accurate?" "Yes, sir." Fenner turned his gaze to Hensley. It wasn't a friendly look. "Why was he detained?" Hensley's chin jutted out. "Possible impersonation. He fit a profile. He got argumentative when I questioned him." "I answered every question," Rowan corrected, his voice calm, contrasting sharply with Hensley's defensiveness. "I asked why I was being stopped. That's when he put hands on me." Fenner nodded at the witness, then turned back to his officers. The temperature in the circle dropped 10 degrees. "Travis, Cole, I'm pulling you off the floor." Hensley stiffened. "Chief, that is unnecessary." "It is necessary," Fenner snapped. "Hand over your radios. We are reviewing body cam footage immediately." "This is ridiculous," Hensley muttered, unclipping his radio and shoving it into Fenner's hand. "If the guy is who he says he is, fine, but we followed protocol." Fenner ignored him. He turned to Rowan. "Senior Chief, given your unit and status, this goes beyond airport jurisdiction. Your command will be notified." Rowan met the chief's eyes. "Understood, sir." Fenner gestured to Carver. "Get him to the conference room, get him water, and preserve every second of that footage. Nothing gets deleted, nothing gets edited." As Rowan was led away, walking tall despite the pain in his shoulder and face, Fenner looked at Hensley one last time. "You'd better hope that camera shows something different than what I'm hearing, because if it doesn't, this isn't an HR problem, it's a federal one." 10 minutes later, the atmosphere in the back offices of the Savannah Airport Police Department had shifted from tense to funereal. Senior Chief Rowan sat in a small conference room, his posture rigid. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the deep throbbing ache in his shoulder and face. Sergeant Carver stood by the door, respectful, silent. Across the hall, the mood was volatile. Hensley and Maddox stood near a desk, stripped of their radios. Maddox looked like he was about to vomit. "This is getting out of hand," he whispered. "We followed our instincts, Travis." "Instincts or assumptions?" Maddox asked, his voice cracking. "Don't start with me," Hensley warned. "It's a bad stop. It happens. We'll get a reprimand and back on patrol in a week." He was wrong. A captain from Internal Affairs walked up to them. He didn't look happy. "Travis, Cole, you're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately." "For what?" Hensley demanded, his voice echoing in the bullpen. "We haven't even given our statements." "You will, but not here." The captain pointed to their hips. "Turn in your sidearms and your badges." Hensley's face went purple. To a cop, surrendering the gun is the ultimate castration. "You're doing this because he's a SEAL, because of politics." "We're doing this," the captain said, lowering his voice, "because I just watched the first 30 seconds of your body cam. Give me the gun, Travis." While Hensley was being disarmed, Chief Fenner was inside his office, holding a phone to his ear. His face was gray. "Yes, sir, I understand. We have the footage secured. The officers are off the street." He listened for a moment, then closed his eyes. "Understood. I'll await your team." Fenner hung up and walked into the conference room where Rowan was waiting. The room went silent. "Senior Chief, that was the Department of Defense liaison." Rowan nodded slowly. "They've notified the Pentagon's Office of General Counsel. They aren't treating this as a misunderstanding. They are classifying this as a targeted assault on a special operations asset." Fenner paused, looking at the door where Hensley was loudly arguing in the hallway.
"And there is one more thing," Fenner said, his voice grave. "The video from the bystander? It just hit 2 million views." Rowan looked up. The silence was over. The verdict was coming. Chief Fenner stood in the conference room, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. He looked at Rowan, then at the notepad in his hand. "The Department of Defense liaison asked one more thing," Fenner said, his voice measured. "They need to know if any racial language was used." Rowan didn't blink. "Yes, and it's on the body cam." Sergeant Carver, standing by the door, felt a chill run down her spine. She had already reviewed the first 30 seconds of the footage on her tablet. She had heard Hensley's sneer, "You people think a costume gets you a pass?" She had heard the crack about guys like him. She knew exactly how that audio would play in a federal courtroom. It sounded like a career suicide note. Across the building, inside the windowless Office of Internal Affairs, the first playback began. The large monitor flickered to life. The timestamp read 06:58 a.m. The room was silent as 3 investigators watched the scene unfold in high definition. They saw Rowan walking with military precision. They saw Hensley step into his path, the aggressive proximity, the unprovoked shove. Then came the sound, the sharp, sickening crack of a human face hitting granite. The lead investigator, a woman named Diaz who had seen it all, paused the video. The freeze frame showed Hensley's knee buried in Rowan's spine. "That's excessive force," Diaz said, her pen hovering over the report. "And that language, that's going to be a problem for the city attorney." "It's worse than that," the second investigator muttered, leaning back in his chair. "Given this guy's unit, this is going way beyond the city." He was right. While the local police were still processing the shock, the federal machinery was already grinding into motion. A priority alert flashed from the DoD to Naval Special Warfare Command. Within 8 minutes, a JAG officer and a Command Master Chief were assigned to the file. Simultaneously, a red phone rang in the Pentagon Civil Rights Division, and because the assault happened in a federal transportation facility, the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General opened a case file. By the time Rowan was escorted to a quiet, secure office to speak with NCIS, his assault was being investigated on 3 parallel tracks: internal police review, federal civil rights violation, and military legal oversight. The speakerphone on the desk crackled. "Senior Chief Rowan?" The voice belonged to NCIS Special Agent Karen Doyle. "I am recording this statement. Everything you say will be briefed directly to the Department of Defense." Rowan leaned toward the phone, his voice steady despite the throbbing in his shoulder. He recounted the stop beat by beat, the random selection, the insults, the shove, the knee, the silence of Officer Maddox. "At any point," Doyle asked, her tone clinical, "did you resist or refuse a lawful command?" "No," Rowan said. "I asked why I was being stopped. I complied with every instruction." "Did either officer use language you believed was racially biased?" "Yes." There was the sound of typing on the other end. "Noted,"
That aligns with the preliminary audio review. In another interrogation room down the hall, the atmosphere was suffocating. Hensley and Maddox sat across from Investigator Diaz. The casual brotherhood in blue vibe was gone. The air was cold. "Walk me through your decision to use force," Diaz said, not looking up from her notepad. Hensley cleared his throat. He was argumentative. He fit a profile we've been warned about. "What profile?" Diaz asked, looking up sharply. Maddox shifted in his chair, the plastic creaking loudly in the silence. He just didn't seem right." Diaz wrote that down. "Did not seem right." She underlined it twice. "Did either officer use language you believed was racially biased?" Neither officer answered. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, 15. "Gentlemen," Diaz said softly, "we have your body cam. We have civilian video. We have a federal agency requesting our files. This is not going away." Outside the interrogation room, the news was spreading through law enforcement channels like a virus. Black Navy SEAL in dress blues, forced to floor, racist language on tape, Pentagon notified. By early afternoon, a secure briefing was underway in Washington, D.C. A still image from the body cam was projected onto a large screen in a sterile conference room. A senior official at the DOJ stared at the image of Hensley's knee on Rowan's back. "Which department?" the official asked. "Savannah Airport Police," a staffer replied. "2 officers, one with prior complaints." "And the service member?" "Senior Chief, Naval Special Warfare, clean record, highly decorated." The official nodded once. "Then this will be handled at the highest level. Burn it down." Back in Savannah, Chief Fenner stood by his window, staring at the tarmac. He felt the weight of the storm hitting his department. "This is about to get a lot bigger than us," Carver said quietly from the doorway. "It already has," Fenner replied. Down the hall, Hensley walked out of the interrogation room, trying to maintain his swagger. Then he stopped. Coming through the double doors was a phalanx of men in sharp gray suits. They moved with a different kind of authority. They wore federal badges, NCIS, DOJ. For the first time since that morning, the arrogance drained from Travis Hensley's face. He looked at the federal agents, and he realized with a sinking feeling in his gut, this isn't a reprimand. This is an indictment. The feds didn't waste time. By the next morning, they had pulled every camera angle, every radio transmission, and every prior complaint attached to Hensley and Maddox's names. Chief Fenner was summoned to a closed-door meeting. The DOJ attorney didn't offer a handshake. "This is no longer a use-of-force review," the attorney said, his voice flat. "This is a civil rights case involving racial profiling, excessive force, and false statements, and the victim is a Tier 1 asset." Fenner nodded. He knew what that meant. Careers wouldn't be reassigned. They would be terminated. That night, Hensley sat in his living room, the blue light of the TV flickering on his face. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Airport officers under federal investigation." His phone buzzed. It was Maddox. "They took my badge today, Travis," Maddox whispered, sounding like a child. "They said it's temporary, but—" "They're overreacting," Hensley snapped, though his hand was trembling. "I was doing my job." "They played the audio, Travis. The stuff you said, the way you said it. They're calling it bias. They're calling it hate speech." Hensley stared at the TV. "I was doing my job," he repeated, but the words felt hollow in the empty room. At headquarters, Internal Affairs finished their preliminary report. The printer whirred to life, spitting out the final page. The recommendation at the bottom wasn't just termination, it was prosecution. And somewhere in Washington, a prosecutor was picking up a pen to sign the warrant. The hammer wasn't just coming down, it was already falling. When that pen hit the paper, it didn't just end a career, it dismantled a life. The Internal Affairs report was released 48 hours later, and it was a massacre. The findings were absolute. Senior Chief Rowan had been perfectly compliant. There was zero legal basis for the stop, let alone the violence. But the section that made the precinct go silent was the psychological evaluation of Officer Travis Hensley. The report cited clear, undeniable indicators of racial bias in his decision-making. Hensley wasn't just a bad cop, he was officially documented as a prejudiced one. Officer Maddox didn't escape the blast radius. He was cited for failure to intervene and supporting an unlawful detention. The badge he was so afraid to lose was stripped from his chest that afternoon. Both men were placed on unpaid suspension, their firearms confiscated and tagged as evidence, their access cards deactivated. They were ghosts walking out of the building. But the real hammer was falling in Washington. The Department of Defense didn't issue a press release, they issued a warning shot. In a closed-door briefing at the Pentagon, a senior defense official stared down a room of DOJ attorneys and federal investigators. His voice didn't waver. "You do not put hands on our people like that," he said. "Not in uniform, not in public, not ever. And when racism is caught on 4K video, we do not negotiate." Later that week, Senior Chief Malik Rowan sat across from federal agents for his final deposition. He was the calmest person in the room. He described the shove, the knee in his spine, the way the crowd gasped. When asked why he didn't fight back, a man trained to kill with his bare hands, Rowan looked at the agents and delivered the most devastating line of the entire investigation. "I chose not to resist," Rowan said softly, "because I know exactly how fast a black man in cuffs gets labeled a threat. I did everything by the book. They didn't." The system, usually slow and grinding, moved with terrifying speed. Within 30 days, the guillotine dropped. Officer Travis Hensley was terminated for gross misconduct and racial discrimination. But it got worse. The State Law Enforcement Certification Board revoked his credentials permanently. He was barred from ever holding a badge, a gun, or a security license in the state of Georgia. He wasn't just fired, he was erased from the profession. Cole Maddox learned the hardest lesson of all. Silence has a price. He was fired for cowardice. His certification was suspended, his career over before it even really started. He had followed Hensley off a cliff, and nobody was there to catch him. Even the supervisors who had ignored the earlier complaints about Hensley were purged. One was forced into an early, shameful retirement. Another was demoted and reassigned to a basement desk. Then came the civil suit. Rowan filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the airport authority and the officers. The settlement was reached before a jury was even selected. It was in the millions. But for Hensley, the money wasn't the problem. The problem was the record. His name was now radioactive. No police department would touch him. No private security firm would insure him. He was a pariah, destined to explain that Google search result for the rest of his life. Weeks later, Malik Rowan walked through another airport. He was in uniform. He was carrying his orders. He walked past a group of police officers near the TSA checkpoint. They looked at him. They looked at his rank, and they nodded respectfully. No one stopped him. No one asked if he belonged. Back in Savannah, inside the briefing room where Hensley used to drink his coffee, a new training bulletin was tacked to the corkboard. It didn't have a lot of text. It didn't need it. It was a single high-resolution still frame from a body camera. It showed a black man in navy dress blues pinned to the dirty floor with two white officers driving their weight into his back. Underneath the photo, in bold black letters, was a caption that would haunt every rookie who walked through those doors for the next 20 years. "This is what failure looks like." But as the officers stared at that photo, learning their lesson, somewhere in America, another phone was recording, another stop was going bad, and another verdict was waiting to be written.